Good evening. Today we're going to be making tomato confit with these amazing heirloom tomatoes, and we're going to do two things with it. We're going to use some of the tomatoes we make to make a simple soup out of it, and a couple of them we're going to kind of fry with some cheese and make this melty, gooey, delicious treat. So, prep here is fairly simple. I've got this baking dish that I'm going to put my tomatoes in. We're going to end up using lots of olive oil. Confit, I believe by definition, is something cooked in its own fat, like duck confit, duck cooked in duck fat. But we seem to generally use it for something that's cooked in a lot of oil like this, kind of low and slow till it's kind of gooey and oozy. Whereas we might just call this a fry, but to start with, I'm going to take some of my olive oil, just making sure the bottom is coated there for when I set the tomatoes in. And then I've taken a whole head of garlic, and I've gone ahead and prepped a little ahead of time by separating the cloves from it. And all we're going to do is peel these. Trim the ends off to make that easier. You hear some noise. The refrigerator is particularly talkative today. I'm just going to take the knife and press to crush these. We are aiming to keep the cloves whole. Roast and cook inside the tomatoes and in the oil. Let's just take these out of their skins. It's kind of already split and a little large, so I'll just break him up a little. Okay, so we have our cloves of garlic. I have peeled and halved a red onion. We're just gonna do a fairly rough chop. Same on this half. Move these to the side just a bit. Give myself a little bit of room. And then we're going to just core out the tops of the tomatoes. I use my paring knife. And with a slicing action, pop these out. I'm just going to cut that one a little bit deeper. Okay. I'm going to place that in my baking dish. And same with this fellow. Core out of there. Just take a little bit more out so I have some room to stuff this one. Sharp knife for this. As you can see, we have 6. That in there. We want them as cozy as possible. I chose my baking dish to kind of just barely accommodate them. This dish does use a lot of olive oil in filling up our baking dish here, so the tighter it is, kind of the easier that is, and you use less oil. Alright, now that those are done, let me just move this. Bring this front and center. And we're just going to start tucking in our onion and garlic. And then I've got fresh sage leaves and some fresh sprigs of thyme. And it would call for some fresh oregano as well. I don't have that today. I use just a pinch of dried oregano. I like oregano, so I'm going to get some in there. Let's go ahead and start slotting in some of these guys here. Let's get a garlic clove in there too. This recipe comes from Francis Mallman. He's an Argentine chef. I find him to be really interesting. He's definitely a character. But his thing is he basically does almost everything over open fire. Very rustic approach. He started in the world of kind of haute cuisine and rebelled against that by doing very rustic foods prepared over fire, kind of the traditional way of Argentina, and leading into some of the old preparation methods of indigenous cultures. He basically lives on a remote island, and people can go there and learn from him and experience his cooking. There's a Chef's Table episode, which is how I became aware of him. But, like I said, kind of a character. But I really like his wood-fired cooking, kind of a lot of his approach to life. I'm gonna go ahead and tuck some more in here. Get some of these garlic cloves into that oil, along with the rest of my onions. Just have a big flavorful baking dish full of aromatic oil. And let's tuck in some of these herbs. Some of this sage. I particularly love sage. Cozy little pockets in these tomatoes. Sage smells terrific here. Go ahead and set a couple of these around as well. Okay, so this is basically what we needed to do. We're going to sprinkle with a small amount of red wine vinegar. The acidity will give us a bit of brightness. And then we're just going to take olive oil and fill up our dish about halfway up the side of the tomatoes. like I said, uses quite a bit of olive oil, a bit on those guys. We're almost there. My backup olive oil to help us out. Alright, and that should be just fine. So let's do that pinch of oregano. Sprinkle with some salt. And some fresh cracked pepper. And I've been preheating my oven to 325. So we're going to go in for about 2 hours and then a few minutes under the broiler to just finish them out. Alright, so let's do it. Alright, so I'm going to get a fire going here because we want to do a finish of these tomatoes. With some cheese, we're going to melt them on a griddle over the fire. So I'm going to do a basic log cabin style fire, a little bit of a hybrid, a little lean-to inside for my smaller wood. Got these 2 base logs. Form our initial structure here. It's been kind of wet, so there's some old charcoal and ash in the bottom. That is fairly wet, and hopefully the wind isn't picking up too badly either. Add one more larger log back here. And then I've got some smaller wood for kindling. And I'm going to need to break this into even smaller strips. Got my Kershaw Emerson here, which I absolutely love. I wish I'd bought like 6 of these, but we're going to do some heavy duty labor with it. Some basically batoning of this wood to make some smaller strips that we can use. Split those off like that. Safer to use a tool like that. This is kind of an awkward piece of wood. This is what we want to do. Get this split into smaller pieces that we can use for our kindling. So we're getting some nice smaller pieces that I'm going to start propping up here. So help get our fire started. Lean-to here. Little chips for a very small kindling would start off more like a Tinder and not the dating app. Definitely kind of awkward little pieces, but this particular pack of wood I got doesn't really have any good ones. So we're gonna make do with what we have. Then let's shave off some real small pieces. For that tinder. Shavings. I'm going to toss those in there. Get them underneath there. These will catch first. And help start our other wood. A little bit more. The knife a bit of a workout here today. And then I've got some smaller pieces. I'm actually going to split this one as well. So we have some smaller pieces to work up in size. And I'll have this ready to set on here as we get started. box of matches, and it really didn't want to burn at all. And so, you might hear the dog. He's ready for dinner. Layer in these pieces so we can get things going here. Dry kindling makes all the difference in terms of getting a fire going. As your match burnt. I already feel toasty, so I'm going to step back. Alright, so I've moved things around a bit to kill some of the fire. Added a little charcoal, give myself some coals for flexibility for the heat that's going to go under my griddle. I'm going to put that on the fire now. I'm going to get that heated up. Alright, so what we're going to do is brush some olive oil on the griddle. I have my tomato, and I have added some Asiago cheese to the inside of it. The recipe calls for like a semi-soft pecorino. This is what I had available as a sub. Now, this tomato is definitely cooked longer than I wanted it to. So these were very juicy tomatoes. There was a lot of liquid, so I think when they were cooling, that maintained the heat a lot longer and sort of cooked these more than I intended when I took them out. But I've got my big spatula here. I have a second spatula, and this is already a crazy recipe where we're going to flip this over onto the griddle. Bring things together there. Yeah, ideally we wanted that full tomato structure. It's definitely broken down. It'll be perfect for the soup. But that's okay. Sometimes things don't turn out exactly like you wanted. I should have pulled more liquid out, probably as it was baking. Pulled it out once, but could have gone again, I think. And all we really want to do here is just get some browning and get that cheese kind of all melty and gooey and delicious. We'll let this go for just a minute, a few minutes. And then we'll get the fun task of kind of scraping and popping that thing off there. So I think this is going to be done. Since it's going to be an ooey, gooey, cheesy mess, I try to do a big scrape underneath with my larger spatula. I have my smaller one to help. I think we're just going to have to go for it. Okay, so it's a little less elegant than we wanted because we broke down the tomato too much, but we got the browning that we wanted and a nice gooey melted cheese. So I'm gonna give this a taste. I bet it's still going to be delicious. Alright, so now we're going to make our soup. I have the tomatoes we've done as a confit, and they definitely have broken down more than I hoped for. There was a lot of liquid and I pulled some off during cooking so it didn't overflow. These were very juicy tomatoes. And probably should have pulled more off a second time. There's a lot of liquid volume. So I think that retained the heat and cooked these a lot more. When I first took them out, they were more solid, retaining their tomato shape. As you can see, they've kind of almost totally broken down. So that's going to make our second recipe a little chaotic, where we do a stuffing of cheese and griddle them. But for the soup, this is going to be fine since we're going to break them down anyway. I'm going to pull out the herb stalks. So the soup is very simple. I'm going to add these tomatoes to my pot here. And they're already flavored with that garlic and onion and those amazing herbs. You just kind of scoop them up. Alright, I'm going to leave that one as we're going to do the cheese and griddling of that one. So what I'm going to do now is just blend this up. I'll turn the volume way down. Alright, we have that blended up. I'm heating this. There's really not much more we have to do. We already did the hard work in cooking these with that confit. So I left it somewhat chunky. Have some nice texture in there. I did reserve some of the tomato liquid using a separator here, since there was a lot of fat from the olive oil, just to help focus on getting more of the juice. Just by adding the confit, we're getting plenty of fat into this soup. Just gonna add a little bit more juice here. Just heating it up. I'm going to give it a quick taste. And I do want to add some more salt. And some more pepper as well. It's pretty tasty. It's just a lot of that fresh tomato, nicely cooked tomato. And we're just warming this up. A nice comforting tomato soup. And there's already some tanginess from the vinegar that we added in the confit. Of course, tomatoes are acidic, so I don't think this needs any additional brightness. If it was too acidic, we temper it with more of that olive oil. Just getting this warm. I think it's basically going to be ready to go. This benefits from using amazing tomatoes. I had those phenomenal, very ripe heirloom tomatoes. Really tasty. Just give it another taste here. Still a touch more pepper. We're going to get 2 additional flavorings that'll happen when we serve. There will be goat cheese and also some cilantro. Okay, but I think that we are done with this. It is that simple. Okay, for this next bit, I've got a cast iron skillet heating. We're gonna cook this last tomato on there. I'm gonna pop some cheese into its pocket where we took the core out. Tuck just a little bit more in there. And let's get some olive oil in our pan here. Turn that heat down a bit. And we saw doing this on the campfire, but you can also do it on a skillet like this indoors. I'm just gonna scoop this guy up. We're gonna So lots of water content, getting that oil, a lot of sputtering and sizzling. But we're just going to cook this for a few minutes to get that cheese all melty and brown the top of that tomato a bit. Kind of a dicey operation flipping it over like that, but hey, Francis Mallman do the rustic, so it's a little more free form, not so contained and perfect. You know, it's nice, soft tomato, melty cheese, very good stuff. The nice thing is this tomato did stay fairly intact, which is what we wanted. We're just going to have to scrape this under there and try to get a hold of all of this. stick around, so we'll get that on the top of this tomato. Alright, so here we have our two dishes prepared from the tomato confit. We have our confit tomato, which was then griddled with some cheese, pecorino, I use some Asiago. It's a gooey mess, like we talked about. They broke down a little bit more. Cooking them as confit, should have stopped sooner, got more of that liquid out, but a little bit chaotic, a little bit wild, very rustic, but things aren't perfect. It's still fun, and it's going to be very delicious. And this is our wonderful tomato soup. And to finish, got some goat cheese that we'll add in, and a little bit of cilantro. In this case, it happens to be some micro cilantro. And that is our tomato confit soup. So two wonderful tomato treats from incredible heirloom tomatoes.